Alan, I've had a few questions that have just been pressing ever since I decided I might be wanting to go into this field. What's the difference between not guilty and innocent? Is there a difference?
There is a difference. Not guilty in a jury trial would mean that the jury has determined one of two things. Either they've determined that the person is in fact innocent, or they've determined that the government has failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So a not guilty verdict encompasses two things: the notion that the person may be innocent, or that the government has just failed to meet their burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Sure.
In a criminal trial in the United States, a jury has a choice of only two verdicts: guilty or not guilty. And of course, as we've just discussed, not guilty can mean one of two things. We find this person innocent, we don't think they did anything wrong, or we're not sure, but the government just hasn't convinced us beyond a reasonable doubt that they did do that which they're accused of.
Right. So, as a lawyer, how do you defend someone you know is guilty? As in, someone comes to you and they need legal support, and you know that they're guilty, and is it ever hard for you to say yes?
It may be sometimes,
you know. Involved?
Well, it's not just based on that, but first of all, you don't always know. And secondly, people who hire criminal lawyers don't always hire them to get off.
Sure.
For the most part, they're just hiring a lawyer to get them a more palatable result. And in the private practice of criminal law, which is what we do, we don't typically represent the axe murderer, rapist of a small child, or someone who commits particularly heinous crimes. Those kind of people are usually nutcases, and they end up with public defenders. But it does happen where we represent people who I have a sense that they are guilty of doing something that's, rather reprehensible. But interestingly enough, the more reprehensible the crime that the person is accused of, the less likely they fess up to it to their lawyer.
Sure.
Drug dealers, for instance, make no bones about the fact that that's what they do. And if they get caught, they come in and want to hire us either to try to get them off if there's a legal issue that would allow us to get the evidence thrown out, or just to get them a better result.
Sure. Do you ever find that it's hard to trust these people when they come through your door, that they'll either pay you or they won't? How do you handle that?
Well, I don't think it's required that we trust them. I'm not sure where that's necessary. I mean, if they tell us their version of the situation, which is totally in conflict with the government's investigation, which we're always provided with, then we'll bring them in and question them as to the discrepancies.
What about when you're asking for money?
What about
when
that?
When you need to get paid, how can you trust that they'll pay you? How do you work with
Well,
that?
we don't represent them until we're paid. We are hired up front.
Sure.
And so, most criminal lawyers require payment in full up front before they proceed in representing someone. Now, there are different kinds of crimes that inherently involve lack of trustworthiness. But we also represent people on DWIs, for instance. And depending on who the person is, what their background is, there's no reason to suspect initially that they're not trustworthy. They're regular people who go to a business event or a wedding and have one drink too many and make a bad decision about driving.
Sure.
But that person isn't the same as, someone who might commit a more serious crime of violence, for instance.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. That answered what I answered.
You're very welcome.